Welcome to the Wealth Guide podcast, episode 69, Property After the Budget and What Still Works. So on this episode, we are joined by the lovely Sarah Pyke from Bond Financial, and we are going to unpack the myths, the theories, what is law, what is not, what are the headlines, and what still works. Join us for this information session and I hope that you get as much out of it as we will. All right, welcome to the Wealth Guide podcast, episode 69, everybody. Super excited. Today we're going to talk about property after the budget and what still works. And to walk us through that, we've brought in an expert guest, Sarah Pyke, founder, CEO, accountant, tax specialist from Bond Financial. So thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure.
Absolute pleasure. Ray, I'm not sure what it is that you do, but I know you are the founder of Ryker, and apparently you're really good at what you do.
Not sure about that.
And we brought Jack, also an executive advisor, but Jack's here for the jokes. So property investment. So it hasn't been abolished, but it's definitely been changed. The tax landscape is definitely different. Some people are all for it. Some people are up in arms. What we want to do today is sort of unpack, what that looks like, what we're seeing, how we're pivoting and adapting. And all those sort of things. So, Sarah, can we just sort of kick off with you? As a specialist in your space, what are the things that you're seeing from clients?
Yeah, I think it's certainly been I think it was a bit of more of a shock as to, look, we sort of knew a little bit about what was coming, but I think when it actually was announced and then landed, I think it just took people by surprise.
Yeah.
And I think more so it took new investors, people that were just either into the market, recently or looking to get into the market. I think it really shook them and what they sort of understood to be maybe the benefits of property.
Yeah.
I think if you're a seasoned investor, it's a blip. You sort of look at that and go, yeah, okay, did we need it? Maybe parts of it. Is it going to change my strategy, long-term investor strategies? Yeah, I don't think it's going to have a lasting effect in that respect.
Yeah, okay. And look, before we get into the nitty-gritty of it all, tell me, at Bond Financial, what is it that you do to support clients in these spaces?
Yeah, so we, being a property investor myself for the last 16 years, we have a lot of property investor clients. So a lot of clients who might have one property, they've just gotten into property, they've got multiple properties. So we're often consulting them on, the do's, the don'ts, the structures. Mm-hmm. And at the moment, yeah, there's sort of been a lot of discussions around, well, where do we go from here, and then the whole trust piece. And then outside of that, it's business, tax, accounting, outsourced CFO.
Excellent. And Ray, because I'm going to set a debate in a moment. So before we do that,
Excited for this.
Just for those that haven't listened to our podcast before, what do we do at Ryker to support people in this landscape?
Well, obviously, for a tax financial planning firm, we support our clients with a variety of different tax strategies along what working with the accountant like Sarah. So we guide the people through the super, the insurances, the investment strategies, and variety of different financial planning functions. And that's what we excel at.
Okay, great. All right, so are we ready? The debate. I'm going to read it out.
Debate? We don't do that.
We're going to do a debate today. So public conversation has bundled all of these topics and the reforms together.
There's so many TikToks.
Correct. Some of them are legislated, some of them are commencing after certain dates, and some of them are still proposals. So with that said, whether it's an existing property that's broadly protected under the grandfathering rules, we all know that new builds still retain that negative gearing preferential treatment. Established properties are the ones that face very different treatment under the new settings. And then obviously consultation on discretionary trusts. That's closed, but the final position, it's still not set yet. So my question is, with all of these being bundled together, and we're going to open with you, Sarah, where would you say public conversation has been accurate and where would you say it's been simplified?
Look, I think accurate, maybe there was a need for some of this to come through and, dampen our raging property market. It has done so well, and I'm not complaining because I've done very well of it, but it just didn't seem to slow down, like particularly in Sydney. We're talking about Sydney, around the nation, it's very different. state by state. But it just, we went through COVID and you really thought it would probably go backwards, and it just went through the roof.
Correct.
So, look, I think there was some merit behind that, and I think, a lot of us probably understand and agree with that aspect of it. But in saying that, I think, a lot of the purpose around these changes were to help new people get into the market, help with first home buyers, that sort of thing. But it hasn't changed the supply factor.
No.
The supply demand has not changed in what they've produced.
Yeah.
And in a way, like as an investor, everything's being grandfathered. So, for me, the changes are, and for most of us, the changes are fairly minimal.
Yeah, absolutely. What about for you, Ray? With these reforms, do you think they are fundamental for the property investment, or do you think they're exposing strategies that were too dependent on tax concessions?
Look, I think for me, there's a lot of chatter firstly. The chatter was mostly around the negative gearing side and the CGT side, right? The negative gearing is not dead, I think, first and foremost, right? If that was the case, there'd be a lot of LinkedIn eulogies written right about now.
We're seeing a few of them though, right?
We are
I
seeing
think that's what we're talking about, how much of it is reality versus simplifying.
But for the existing property investor, if bought before budget night, that still exists. That doesn't change.
Yeah.
If you bought an existing property after the budget night, obviously that changes a little bit. The losses are quarantined. But in saying that, the conversation is more about planning rather than panic. But if you look at the state at the moment, abolishment would be a lot easier. You're in Australia, we don't.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And what about you, Jack? With your clients, are you seeing really considered questions, or are you seeing that headlines are creating pressure that is probably unnecessary before they fully understand things?
It's a bit of both, actually. It sometimes can be detrimental to make that decision because your senses are heightened. You're seeing news, you don't know what's right or wrong. You're seeing on TikTok, you're seeing on YouTube, you hear it from the uncle next door.
Yeah.
And you sit inside. And then I guess from my perspective, you have to have that discussion. How do you educate that client? How does it look for them?
Yeah.
Where there's negative gearing, where's capital gains tax? How does that translate to their overall plan?
Yeah.
That conversation I'm having at the moment.
Correct.
What does that look for me, Jack?
Yeah. Okay. Great. And what about for you, Sarah? Talking about negative gearing from a tax perspective, these transitional rules, obviously they create risk for investors. But do you think it's more a misunderstanding of their position or understanding how to pivot?
I think it's a bit of both. I think there is a lot of confusion out there, and depending on where you sit, and the thing is, there's so many time dates now, time periods, and look, it's an accountant's worst nightmare. I saw the budget proposal, I was like, oh my goodness. And so there's a lot of confusion if you're not already well versed in some of this stuff. It's like, well, how does this apply to me? Does it apply to me? When does it apply to me?
Yeah.
And so I think, look, structure has been a big conversation we've had now since May. Obviously, though, with some of the changes yet to be solidified, like the trust changes, we're in a bit of a no man's land when it does come to some of the structure advice and some of the answers to some of these questions. But I think it's definitely more about pivoting and then seeing how you can now make it work in this sort of new landscape.
Yeah. Well, I guess one of the biggest things that you see is that they say that the objective is to direct investment to housing supply. Yeah. Do you think, Ray, that tax incentive will actually support that, or do you think it will just inflate the demand for new build stock?
Look, I think it will definitely inflate the demand for the new build stock. Whether it's sort of really helped the first-home buyers is yet to be seen, and I think it's a bit early to make a call on that.
There's a lot of stats around it already coming out at the moment indicating otherwise.
Exactly, and I think those indications don't look all that great, and I think is the tax reform going to help? Like I said, it's just going to take 6 or 12 months' time for the dust to settle, and then really start to see some granular numbers to go, well, is it actually helping?
Yeah.
I think for the time being, like Sarah mentioned, I think it's all about having the right strategy and structure in place, and when things do get legislated, how do you pivot and make those changes?
Yeah. Okay. So putting aside all of that, so at the moment, obviously, we see that, a new build will receive a better tax treatment, whilst an existing build or an existing property might be in a better location. How does somebody assess the trade-off for that, and how do they go about it? Does anyone have any thoughts on that?
Well, for me, it's all about the numbers.
Yeah.
So, I guess, but I guess whenever anyone comes to me with a question, a client or otherwise, my first thing is, well, what's the long-term goal? What's actually your plan here? And look, I think when you're talking about property, really, it's never a short-term decision. it's long term. It's going to be held for many, many years. And that's where property, does create that value for you. So, I think it's more sort of making sure that you're really clear on what that is for you personally, because that can change my answer, hugely. If you're in the intention of actually buying and flipping and actually sort of being in the business of, buying and selling houses, that sort of thing, which I've had chats recently on, then that puts you in a very different conversation to buying one house, buying two houses, and then just sitting on them for the next 10 years.
Yeah. So, I'm interested to know that as financial planners, with what Sarah's saying, because it's very insightful, how do you articulate that and put that into your strategy when you're talking with a client?
Well, look, I think it will come down, Mel, again to the long-term growth of that asset. So I think it's not just about going, well, if the property prices are sort of starting to fall now, do I buy this property now? It's more about, even if I'm in 2035, does this asset add value to me? But also then the conversation sort of shifts around going, well, what does a CGT look like if this rule prevails? And am I going to be making out of this asset, or am I just putting all this hard work and effort only to pay anything out of it easy, a significant amount of money in taxes for that?
Yeah, exactly.
So I think it's a conversation around what their long-term goals are, what their objectives are. Is it more income-oriented? Is it more growth-oriented? What does the tax treatment look like? Either.
Yeah.
Yeah, good point, right? And with these changes and proposed deadlines, it kind of caused a bit of a panic because of this 1st of July next year.
Yeah.
And some people are forward planning, do I sell this property now?
Yeah.
Get the capital gains tax of 50%, or do I wait?
But on the flip side, I think what a client's conversation having at the moment, because as an example, the catch-up contribution rule will change as a result of it, that you want to write off that against
Correct.
property. So if I was to sell property today, I can still use contribution in my super as a vehicle to minimize that capital gain tax. So at some stage, it is important to have that conversation. Whereas in the other cases, it might just be a bit too early to have that conversation now. If the long-term goal is for them to still negative gear that asset and they've got a good chunk of time in retirement, you'd want to delay that because you don't know what the rule looks like the next 10 to 10.
Yeah. So it's interesting, right? We talk about this reform and it's meant to be around supporting first home buyers. However, there is some data around that shows that 2/3 of properties that are negatively geared are through families who have a taxable income of about $87,000, and that their claimable deduction is roughly, between 8 and 10 grand. So I guess that challenges the argument that, is this supporting the equity of wealthy people, or is there a danger that this is actually not supporting anyone?
Perhaps the government,
Right.
when you're raising its taxes, ultimately is trying to catch up on all the bread figures they're in at the moment. So potentially could be a case where it sort of potentially could help the government.
Yeah.
And I think when Jim Chalmers sort of put the stats up, it was definitely going to help them come out of the deficit.
Yeah. Yeah.
So for me, it was like, is it really serving to see it? I'm going to be real unpopular here. Next thing I know, I've got the ATO knocking on the door.
Yeah. I mean, you're doing the actual tax accounting. Like you would see, what it looks like for an investor and the average income earning of that for those. Do you have any thoughts around that?
Yeah, and I think that's like a lot of the commentary has been across social on, this is, and across all the proposals and all the changes has been, this is great, it's going to affect the wealthy, it's going to mean they're going to pay more tax and all this sort of thing. And I just don't see that to necessarily be true.
Correct.
Because, with a lot of this, like all of my clients, they're just mums and dads. Their mums and dads either working full time or they've got a small business that they, are running everything through. And, some of these changes could mean huge changes in their cash flow, in tax down the road, and these people aren't millionaires. They're not the wealthy. The wealthy have robust teams, they have robust structures, they have all the best advice. These sort of changes aren't really going to change their world significantly, but it is changing the world of mum and dad investors around the country.
Whatever happened to the slogan that Australia was a land of opportunities? I think that's going out the door really quickly, right?
The land of what is a question now.
Absolutely. All right, so let's move on to capital gains and trusts. I'll just throw that sentence out there. What's the first thing that comes into mind?
It's the same story as the gearing, right? There are some significant changes to it. Not to say that you can't come up with some creative strategies with regards to how to minimize it, but I think it's just, like I said before, it just depends on the timing of when, how, the goals of the client.
Yeah.
I had a meeting last week actually about that. They had a property at WA. It's doing gangbusters. Almost double, triple the value. And they're thinking, Jack, capital gains tax, first of July, do we sell it now? Great.
And that's the thing, right? Because there are so many different ways it can be treated. There's the split treatment, the valuation method, the existing method, the new, what does that look like? And I guess from your perspective, how do you manage that? Because that's a lot of record keeping for you.
Yeah, no, don't get me started.
Especially for first of July.
Yeah. I'm not really looking forward to it, to be honest. But that's the thing. I think people are really jumping in already and going, "Oh, I'm now going to buy all my properties in companies," and I'm like, "Well, that's not necessarily the answer either, because look, whilst the 50% discount, yes, has been removed, obviously grandfathered but removed from 1 July next year, that indexation, it's still a form of concession. Whereas you go into a company, there is no CGT concession in a company. So I think we've got to make sure that we're consulting clients, we're educating clients that not to make rash decisions just based on what's currently there at the moment. Because I think if you actually did the numbers again, you might find that going into a company actually would still be more detrimental than keeping it either in your personal name. Or in New South Wales, you'd be using a hybrid trust. You'd be using a fixed type of trust for property. You wouldn't be using a discretionary trust due to land tax. But it's sort of making sure that we're educating so they're not just jumping into things that could actually be detrimental down the line.
Yeah, exactly. Yes, yeah. The numbers, like Sarah said, land tax is not applicable in trust.
In discretionary trust.
Trust.
Yes, you wouldn't use that for property anyway.
And also the land tax free threshold. Correct me if I'm wrong. Individuals get it.
Correct. Trust gets nil.
Zero.
Yeah.
It's another thing to factor in as well.
But in saying that, and that's the thing. So discretionary trusts, though, are the ones where the 50% discount has been carved out. Whereas a unit trust or some sort of hybrid trust, which generally is like a unit trust, they are excluded from some of these new rules. So you've really got to. That's the thing. You've got to dig into the detail. You've got to dig into what actually makes sense for us for this particular investment class, and then.
It's understanding for these investors that are transitioning, where will the real complexity be and what does that look like in its future landscape?
That's
you
right.
Almost ask the question is, if you're a property valuer right now, you can be very busy in the next 12 months.
Yep.
B, is that one valuation document going to be the best record-keeping document you can hold for future sales?
Yeah, I think it depends. Again, it come down to the timing, wouldn't it? Because obviously, if you look at the valuation of the assets now, they're quite low. It should obviously come down to 10%.
Yeah.
And if you use that valuation, yes, it works in your favour.
Well, if you ask the government, they're going to say that the idea of all these changes is that property inflation should sit at around 2% over the next 10 years.
Yeah.
That'll be interesting.
I guess time will tell.
We've got 12 months on that one.
Governments probably use Chat GPT and their modeling treasury. I don't know, sitting there, there's numbers. They say, I'll plug in a number there and give it to the treasurer.
Yeah. From a financial planning point of view, with all these reforms and changes and bits and pieces that are in play, is this a time where people really should be, rather than considering selling, just considering review their future plan and what that looks like?
Absolutely. I think the key aspect of that would be, what is this purpose of this asset? Are you passing it down to your kids? If that's the case, then should we look at a testamentary trust in that aspect? If that was a purpose of the negative gearing side to minimise taxes, what does that look like? So the planning conversations will all depend on the client's age group, where they are in that point of time in their lives. And then you sort of essentially plan out the different structures for them and look at what's going to best suit their needs and goals.
Yeah. What about you?
Yeah, it's the same thing. Goes back to what Ray was saying. It goes back to steps to that initial goal. But like I said before, because of some of these time frames, it kind of skews what we're trying to do with the client.
Yeah.
Time frames. Some of these assets now, people are retiring now, or some of them are pushing it forward rather than later on because they're worried.
Yeah.
So our job is to say, well, hold on, let's take a step back. Let's have a look and see what this looks like. And let's engage also, your professional accountant to see what this all looks like for beyond it.
Yeah.
I get part of that and then make an informed decision.
And sometimes it's also very hard to plan because some of it's passed, some of it hasn't been passed.
Yeah, exactly.
So where do I go with this? I'm like, the client's coming in and going, So do I own an investment property? Is this illegal now?
No, it's not illegal.
That's the part we're finding tough because it's, I've had conversations a lot around trust in the last sort of 2 to 3 months. And I'm like, honestly,
settled yet. They're not legislated
and I'm like,
yet.
honestly, before budget night, it was a no-brainer. I said there is absolutely no harm in you having a trust for, most investment reasons. But now I'm like, I don't know. Like it's too, depending on which way it goes, it could be detrimental.
Yeah. So you know what, Sarah, thank you for saying that because you've led me on to a question that I crafted and I have to read it because I don't want to get it wrong. And it will probably spark some serious conversation here. So Australia has more than 1 million trusts, right? And approximately 840,000 of those are discretionary. Now, obviously, all these changes are around tax, but we all know that these trusts are also used for asset protection. They're used for business succession, estate planning, and family wealth management, right? So I guess the question is has this debate and all these changes unfairly characterized trusts as tax avoidance engines rather than what they are for most people? And is this reform justified?
It's justified to a point where I think government just wants to make that clearly outline. If it's for an asset protection, it should be tested. If it's purely for, minimising taxes, then you'd have to the individual names. But where you have this family trust where people can decide what they want to filter and what they want to filter out, having bucket companies and aligning some of the minimisation of those tax strategies which bucket companies serve pretty well.
Yeah.
They want to avoid all of that. Is the way I'm seeing it.
Yeah.
But I think, like I said, it's yet to be debated because it still is a consultation paperwork. Nothing's been finalised yet.
No, I'd agree there with Ray though on, certainly I think some aspects of it, like yes, bucket companies, where you're using a corporate beneficiary sort of as a reduced tax beneficiary, that that has merit. I get that. That is a way that some people can be squirreling away money that, look, it has to be taxed eventually, but it's getting a discounted tax rate on it initially. But I think, coming back to my previous point where, I would say probably a lot of those trust owners are mums and dads with 2 kids.
That's right.
And they're running a little corner store or, they're running a small business and they're like, oh, we're just going to, our kids have just turned 18. We're going to give them a little bit of money. But that's now really, you're looking at it minimum, again, as only proposed. So that 30% sort of real tax rate, that's because it falls outside the marginal step system. You need to have basically an equivalent income of about $200,000 to make that actually make sense. Yeah. So you're now taxing these 18-year-olds on, at a humongous tax rate for maybe 20 grand, 30 grand.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's a great thing. So if families are restructuring their trusts alone around tax, what broader implications or strategies should they be considering, or what could they be compromising?
There's a few points I think Ray alluded to it. A few things is how do you asset protection, how do you transfer assets to families in cases of that nature. Always a conversation we start with, what's the purpose of this? Is it really asset protection or is it tax?
Yeah.
Right? So you stem from that, you create a solid plan, a craft plan around that, and you follow that tree, I guess.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes, you're right, Jack. It's all the unsexy stuff, isn't it? It's,
Unfortunately, is.
ultimately, it's knowing your property, knowing your rules, what applies to you. Don't design your life around the consultancy paperwork, because that's going to create more damage than it's going to create good.
Yeah.
And ultimately, look at your aligned goals and objectives of what you're doing for each assets. And even before buying the asset, understand what your entry and exit point looks like in each asset class, whether it's shares, whether it's property, and what tax you might be potentially up for. So that forward planning becomes so important now than ever before. Before, people would just go, throw it all in, and we'll just work out stuff later.
And I bet that 840,000 trust owners are probably thinking now, it's probably a good thing, saying, hold on, this is happening now. Should I get advice?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's
Right?
the best thing you can do right
Exactly.
Just get advice, don't act.
I think to talk to my
Yeah,
accountant
correct.
now, talk to my financial. So to some degree, some of these things has kind of put some lens or highlight to get advice, which is good in that sense.
Agree.
And that's the only thing I can think of that comes out that's good for the budget.
All right. Next big word, SMSF.
What does it stand for?
I know. It's a PG session. PG session. So obviously we've got, you know, the LRBA changes,
Yep.
residential versus commercial.
Yeah.
And I guess it opens up the whole conversation around, you know, and again, I know you guys know the stats and I welcome you to declare them. How many people who are owning an SMSF that are really like high income earners versus mums and dads just trying to have a retirement plan? And what are these changes? What are the short-term and long-term impacts of this?
Look, I think from the SMSF point of view, with LRBA changes, mum and dad's going to struggle to buy these properties, or they can't buy it.
Yeah.
The only thing that it's going to push towards now is the commercial assets. Now, you've got to be very careful with the commercial assets. Yes, you can establish the SMSF with the commercial asset, but some of the commercial assets, it's very hard to get rented out if
Correct.
and they can be sitting in the main market for a long period of time. That carries some big detriment because you're carrying a significant debt, and now you're sort of eroding your super fund balance, just having to pay the interest and all the running costs.
That's right.
On these super fund. So there's got to be some careful considerations again around the SMSF side. For the existing people who hold the SMSF, as the lenders retreat that sort of structure on the residential side, what I'm saying would be much like the previous stories around the trust starter lending. They're going to find it harder and harder for harder and harder to find the right lenders in the market, and they're going to be paying some absolute premium rates on these properties.
Yeah, I mean, and then you look at the flip of that though, is if we talk about SMSF, because we talk about this regularly, and we talk about super funds as an example, like what percentage of the population have more than $2 million in super?
Well, that's the thing, yeah, off the back of Ray's comment, it's like, it's basically now making it for the rich, right? Like it's only the people that can afford it, who can pay premium rates,
That's right.
are going to be doing this sort of investment through SMSF.
Yeah, and I feel that the reform, it's been treated as a property opportunity, not a retirement opportunity, where wasn't SMSF set up so that people could future build for retirement in a way that wasn't reliant purely on pensions and super funds. So these changes, like how are we landscaping these from a financial planning point of view?
Well, I'll play devil's advocate on this one.
As you do.
As I always do.
I don't know about the advocate part, but yeah.
on the other side of the fence, I agree what's happened there. But at the same token, what's highlighted is because in any industry, there are people that take advantage of certain rules. Look at it this way. Before the changes, there's property, let's call it what it is, property spookers and things of that nature. They sell this stuff, hey, buy SMSF, this is what you can do, without getting advice. So what happens is when the government sees this, ASIC sees it, it's been looked at for the last 4 or 5 years, nothing new. So what they do, hold on, how do we stamp out these bad eggs in the industry? They put the brakes on that LRBA. So I think as only part of that, that's what's happened. Yes, the stock, in terms of 1% of the residential stocks from LRBA, the story is that moms and dads not getting ahead. Yes, I agree to some degree. But the same token, on the flip side is some people do take advantage of it.
There is a.
I think that's very topical. I'd like to hear an opposing opinion on that.
Like I said, I'm a devil, but maybe not an advocate.
Like for business owners, I think it serves pretty well. Right?
Absolutely.
So if I run a business and I'm going to hire a premise, for instance, for my super fund to buy those premises, and for me to sort of create a bit of a tax strategy around my business can operate as a property, it's great because
Yes.
X amount of dollars in income. Instead of my company paying rent to someone else, I'm paying rent to my property.
Yeah.
My contributions are going to that side, so it still works pretty well.
Yeah, and it hasn't changed. Yeah.
Yes, and absolutely right to Jack's point that obviously there are some colourful characters who were sort of speaking to mum and dads and diminishing their retirement at the same time because there was no proper maths or numbers around this. Because if you look at the rent they were getting was 20,000, 30,000, the outgoing expenses were 50,000, 60,000. So they were going backwards as an example of 30 grand every year. Not even to just break even. You're down by 30.
I've closed.
If I do that for 10 years, you're out by 300K. That's a rough example. Now, that really impacts someone's retirement. Just to get a property sale.
I've wound
That's
up.
devastating.
I've wound up 2 or 3 in the last financial year. Sarah would see this as well. Wind up super fun. It's not worth holding it anymore. Like Ray said, come back by 20 grand, 30 grand.
And it's eye-watering, and sometimes you feel so bad that you don't want to tell them what losses have incurred over that period of time and what gain they made.
Well,
Because it's just pretty much gone down to, they've got everyone's got hands in the pocket. I'm not saying that, might be so you've got to pay for those services, but you've got the agents, the rates, the water, the insurances, the running cost of the SMSF fees coming out. They're all tallies up. And you add that over a period of time, compounded. My God, you're in red. Big time.
Yeah, but okay, but if we circle this back from a property thing, because this is what we're talking about, right? Do we really see this as a responsible retirement policy, or is this just...
It's a knee-jerk reaction.
Yeah.
It's a knee-jerk reaction from the government side because they couldn't contain it, the way I sort of see it. And the knee-jerk reaction was to just go blanket out and go, well, no, LRBA. Like there's no, you can't borrow money for residential property.
Yeah, but again, we go back to how many people actually have enough money in their super to buy a commercial property or the commercial acumen to manage a commercial property.
Yeah, I think stats are yet to be seen. I don't know the stats around it, but I think there wouldn't be that many, I suppose.
The reality is there won't be. That's the fact. Yeah. What about you, Sarah? What are you thinking?
Yeah, I just I think one of the surprising things were, and this isn't really necessarily in relation to SMSF, but with these changes though, it's not just property that's impacting. These the CGT and that sort of thing is across every asset class. So I think that was one thing that whilst they came and went, oh, we're gonna make property more accessible and sort of try and rejig this supply and demand scenario. You're now taxing shares. You're taxing small business owners
yes,
when they're selling their business. So there's already been a bit of a change to that because they've now increased the
thankfully
small business the threshold on that from 2 to 10 million, but. Yeah, they've just now dipped into every single potential opportunity off the back of using property as the kind of foot in the door.
But here's a contradiction. The developer that's going to build a property and that's going to pay this eye-watering CGT, what incentive has it got to build a property? So it's creating more of an issue now.
Yeah.
Supply and demand.
Going, well, why would I go to the heartache? Because creating a property and the logistics around it, the costs around it sometimes can absolutely blow out. So I'm taking that significant risk. And even though I've taken that risk to create this asset, and when I go sell it, I'm going to part with this large chunk of money. Then why did I do all this hard work?
Yeah.
Is it going to really create a demand? Yet to be seen. But I think there still will be far less property.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. All right. So we're going to do a little bit of a game of headline versus reality. And we're going to correct them in a single sentence. I'm going to give you a number of headlines. So, Sarah, I'm going to start with you.
Okay.
Negative gearing has been abolished.
Look, it's still there. It's not really gone away. But I think the landscape just changed.
Cool.
And we have to...
One sentence, Sarah. One sentence was the rule of the game.
All right, well, you got 3.
Two. Okay. Jack, keeping you to one sentence is always the hardest part. So for you, my one is existing property investors are the major losers in the reform. Today, Jack.
Be careful. Be careful. Seek advice.
Okay. Right.
Choose.
You did well. High five. SMSFs can no longer invest in residential property.
That's true. They can't. Existing investors can remain as it is. That's not a change.
Well, they can. They just can't get a loan on it.
They can't get a loan on it. You can still go buy a property if you've got a significant amount of money.
That's it. Exactly. Yep. Okay. Sarah, I'm going to revert back to you. All family trusts will pay minimum tax of 30%.
Watch this space.
What? I love that. That is the power sentence of the day. Excellent. All right, Jack, another one for you. Buying before the deadline is automatically the smarter decision. Well, the deadline's come and gone, but...
Be careful.
All right, Ray, because this is what we do at Ryker. We support this area. Big sentence. Property investing no longer works.
Not true. It still works. You can pair a loss maker with a profit maker.
I love that. And do you want to quickly tell everybody, and keep it concise, not the essay, what is a profit maker versus a loss maker?
So a profit maker would be your positively geared asset where you've got significant income coming out of it. you pair that with a loss maker property, so you're not containing the losses. Instead, you're writing that against the second property.
Yeah. So it in theory, it's also accumulating more than one property, gearing it differently, so that you can get your negative gearing year on year on year,
Correct.
instead of it sitting in the quarantine, which I love to call the ATO cloud.
And the hardest part is, how do you keep records if you hold that property for 20 years?
Absolutely.
Impossible.
Okay. And we're just going to finish off with just a couple of quick questions, right? So the things that we see that are actually being asked by clients on the regular. So I'll ask you, Sarah, first is, do I need to sell before the changes come into play completely?
That's
around capital gains, we'll say it.
Yeah. Look, I would say it's a depends question, but generally no.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, your grandfathered your 50% discount up until that date anyway, the 1st of July 2027. So, chances are, depending on how long you've had the property for, that's still a huge incentive and it's still a huge concession. And then what happens afterwards, again, depends on what your plan is. Are you going to hold it for another year? Okay, that's very short term. There would be maybe minimal impact. Are you going to hold it for another 20, 30 years? That there's a big part of that conversation where, it's looking at, timelines, timeframes, and how that's going to really add up as far as the numbers go. But I would say generally, no, it's not necessary to do that.
Okay, excellent. Jack, I'm going to ask you a question that we hear. Should I choose a new build because it has more favourable negative gearing treatment?
I've said this many times. Tax is just an outcome of what we're trying to do, or any assets, right? Again, going back to planning, what does negative gearing to a person?
Yeah.
Or what's not? So I think, get advice.
Excellent. Love it. I'm going to ask you the big question, Ray, because you're the big man.
Always getting these big.
Complete this sentence. The biggest mistake an investor could make right now is
Not getting advice.
call Ryker. Contact Ryker. Absolutely. And when you contact Ryker, we'll put you in touch with Sarah.
Yep.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Absolutely. All right. So, with that said, we all know the property landscape has definitely changed. And you guys have all heard me say this before. Our parents, our children, everybody will see this come up. We've gone through GFCs, we've gone through recessions, we've gone through wars, we've gone through, interest rates rising to, 20%. And we've also gone through, stock markets changing. What Australians have done really well through all of these is still, managed to pivot, adapt, and look forward. I think in the landscape that we're in right now, doing that with the tools that you have around you that people didn't have before, which is your financial advisor, really good tax advisory from your accounting team and bits and pieces, it does give you that opportunity to still, visit this landscape with more knowledge. So I guess what I would ask is, how would you position the changes if it were you're talking to your family today? And we'll close out with that.
Yeah, I'm not even sure my family really know what I do, but
Sorry, my kids tell you I'm a party planner.
Look, coming back to what you sort of just said there, though, Mel, it's the problem is there's so much information. We now live in this world where you can go onto TikTok, you can go onto all the socials, and someone's got an opinion. Everyone has an opinion. Everyone's heard so and so say something, and their uncle and their whatever. And so that's why I think it's really important to seek out professional advice and really speak to financial planners, speak to your accountant, and get advice from the people who are actually deep into these changes and what's actually going on. And I think I think the kindest thing you can do, if someone even approaches you as a friend or a relative or whatever, is to put them in the right direction of, well, these are the professionals, speak to Jack or speak to Ray or speak to Sarah. Because I see it a lot, even between business owners, they'll be like, oh, yes, well, I've had that scenario, so I did this. And it's like, but that doesn't mean it's right.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think just to close out, most importantly, don't allow the headlines to determine your future plans. Get advice, be structured, be disciplined, and have a strategy.
And also to add to that, sometimes when you see these things, you want to compare what you're doing to the rest of the world, right? So you want to make sure that you stay in your lane. Is it relevant to you?
No.
And go from there. Get advice.
Absolutely, absolutely. Have disciplined investment principles. So for today, thank you so much, Sarah. You have been a gem. I'm sure we could talk tax all day long.
Let's not. I don't enjoy that.
Let's go and have a glass of wine instead. But thank you so much.
Thank you.
We're done.
Awesome.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us today. We hope that you learned the things that we did. We discovered what's not law, what's still only proposed, and how to pivot, adapt, and change in a landscape that means we can still invest. Any questions, reach out. Any comments down below, Ryker Capital. We're here to support you in your investment journey, and there is the opportunity to have property and wealth beyond the changes.